Hello everyone, welcome to our first video. Firstly, I hope everyone's staying nice and safe and healthy. We're going to be presenting to you one exercise and one boredom buster 3 times a week in these little videos. So it'll be every Monday, Wednesday and Friday that we'll be delivering these videos to you. My name's Leanne, so I will be outlining the benefits of each exercise, what we're looking for them to be doing within each exercise, how they should be doing it, and what they shouldn't be doing when they're doing the exercises. And then we've got lovely Ainsley, who is going to be advising the good training tips into how to achieve the exercises properly. So the first exercise that we're going to be covering is transition practice. So it is simple, from a standing position down into a sit, down into a lay, back up into a sit, and then into a stand. So it sounds fairly simple. However, we want them to be doing it correctly, and there's quite a lot of elements which will be going on within this exercise. So when we're asking for our dog to go down into a sit, we're asking them to transition their weight backwards and then slightly forwards. So we're looking for a lot of balance, a lot of control, coordination, and most importantly, core stability when they're doing this this positioning. We're also going to be increasing and improving joint range of motion, and we're also then going to be switching on their muscles as well. So it's a brilliant exercise to start warming up and engaging those muscles. So further on down the line, when we're doing other exercise, it's a great warm-up exercise. So it's a good one to start with. Then when they go down into a lay, we're going to be again improving forelimb joint range of motion, also asking for that weight shifting forward onto those front limbs, and also again switching on those shoulder muscles. When they come back up into a sit, we're going to ask for again joint range of motion, that weight transfer backwards, and then up into a stand. We're looking for that really nice hind limb engagement to really push them off, push them up from that sitting position up into a stand. So we're going to split this up into 4 segments. We're going to start off with the from a standing position down into a sit. I will explain to you what we're looking for when we're doing that exercise and how your dog should be doing that exercise. And then Ainsley is going to give me some nice training tips as to how to perform it correctly. So to begin with, you should have seen at the front of the video, so the start of the video should be some guidelines as to how to do this exercise safely. So the main things are to obviously do it on a non-slip surface when we're doing this, because we don't want them slipping and creating injury. So I will go and get Eddie. So I'm using Sprats. This is quite a high reward treat for him, as he absolutely loves fish. Okay. So we're going to ask him for a nice sit. Good. So when he goes down into a sit, we're asking him to flex. Looking at the Sprats. We're asking him to flex through his hock, through his stifle, and through his hip. When he's going down into that sit, he's going to be transferring weight backwards. And then once he's in the sit, he's going to be transferring that weight forward onto his front limbs. Good boy. I'm going to do a sit. So the main things we're looking for when they're sitting is that his hind limbs are tucked in by the side of his body, so not splayed out. We're also wanting him to be nice and straight. So if I bring him round this way, good boy. I'm going to do a sit. Just trying to get him straight in line with the camera. This way. Good boy. We're looking for him to be nice and straight through his back. We don't want any of this lazy sitting, so going from one side to the other. If your dog is finding this difficult, is finding it difficult to transfer his weight backwards into that nice straight sit, it might be either a training issue, which Ainsley will obviously go into and cover, or it might be that he's a little bit uncomfortable through those hips. The main muscles that we are engaging through this exercise is through those gluteals, so it's through those hip muscles which we're switching on and engaging. Over to you, Ainsley. How do we do this exercise correctly?
So, so many of you will already have a sit as a cue word so that your dog already knows how to put their bottom on the floor. If they don't, what we really want is for them to be concentrating on the exercise they're doing and not on the food that's in your hand. So you saw at the very beginning that the sprats were very tempting, and now we've got some behaviours from the lovely Eddie to say, "Oi, where's my sprats?" You saw that happen just then. Okay, so I would say make sure that the treats are good enough to get the exercise, but not so good that he can't concentrate on what's going on, as Eddie beautifully demonstrates just then. Okay, so so for a basic sit, you might want to just use some of their food so that there is an element of concentration, but they're not over motivated. I always teach a hand signal as well. So it depends on your dog. So for some of you who are maybe gun dog owners, you'll have all of this on hand signals. For some of you who aren't, you know, just ask them very gently for a sit and make sure that they can do that in front of you. You don't need to step forward into them. If they're struggling to sit, just go back to what Leanne said, is they may be finding it hard maybe on the surface that you're on, or it might just be that they're a little bit stiff and they just need you to walk them around the garden a little bit and come back and have another little go. Eddie really loves his sprats.
Yeah. Going back to that discomfort, this is a great exercise for dogs with hip arthritis and hip dysplasia as well, because we are asking them to increase their range of motion within those hips without putting any pressure through those joints, without too much high impact exercise. When they come back up into a stand as well, they're then improving again those that switching on through those gluteals, but also coming up into extension, but not that full extension, which is going to be causing that discomfort with the hip. So it's a really good one warm-up exercise, but also hip strengthening exercise as well. Perfect. So let's move on to the next one then. So from a sitting position, let's come around here, sit. We're going to go down into a lie down. Good boy, good lad. So when we come down into the lie down, we don't want them jumping into position, which Eddie does typically do actually. I tend to have to lure him down into that nice laying down position. We want them to walk down. The reason why we don't want him to jump down is because we don't want to be putting pressure through his elbows there. We want that nice control. So when they come down into that lie position, again, we're looking for them to be nice and straight through the back. Some dogs you'll find will go down into a lay and again they'll roll onto one hip or the other, but we are really looking for that nice straightness. Also, we're looking for a nice straightness through the elbows. So dogs typically with elbow dysplasia or arthritis within the elbows, you might find that they do this action. So they're splaying out with the elbows, and that's typically because they're avoiding the joint flexion. They're avoiding this flexion of the elbow. So instead, they're kicking the elbows out and keeping those elbows into extension, in slight extension. So that's what we're trying to promote when we're coming down into that laying position. We're asking them to transfer weight forward onto their front limbs, and we're asking for flexion through that elbow and also an element of extension through those shoulders as well. Also, it's a good thing to note as to their alignment with those paws, those front paws. So again, when dogs are affected in one limb more than the other, then you might find that they'll be slightly off with those front paws, and that's because one of the elbows is staying in that reduced flexion, and the other one is perfectly fine to come forward. So again, we're promoting range of motion in this exercise, switching on those shoulder muscles and using their core and their balance coordination to transfer that weight down into a nice laying position. So if I just demonstrate that again, so then Ainsley can give me some little training tips then. Should we come back up? Go down. Good. So that's the rolling onto the hip that he's showing there. You can go down. Good boy.
So the tip I would just give you here, Leanne, and for anybody else who is doing this, is make sure you give your dog enough space to get their front legs out ahead of them. So as you can see, Eddie then is really bringing his legs forward, and he probably rolled onto his hip because your feet were just where he needed to be able to be straighter. So the hip gives him the chance to not have to bring his legs so far forward. So that's how we can try to avoid the hip collapse on the side, because we don't want that for the next bit of the exercise that we go on to.
Okay, perfect. And how do you feel about the luring him down as well? I mean, the couple of times I've done it there, he has actually walked down nicely, but typically most of the time he does jump down into position. So I'm having to keep that treat quite close to his nose. Is that something which is okay to do to begin with? To get
Yeah. So to begin with, so I like to put all of these on a cue so that you can actually we can get our dogs to do them kind of as tricks. You know, they're exercises, they've got a lot of benefits to them as you've gone through, but we'd like them to be able to do them as a general trick, and down or lay is a great one to get to help promote calmness. So being able to do it from you standing up and just asking for it. So I would be teaching him you'd lure him, but be giving him a hand signal. So for me, my hand signal is I point to the floor, and so I would point to the floor with a treat tucked between my thumb and my middle finger, so that I can then encourage, when they see this hand movement down, they're moving themselves down to the floor into a lay or a down, whatever your word for this is. For me, it's down. For you, it's, I think, a lay.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So now he's in a nice correct position there. We're just going to bring him up into that sitting. So when going back to what we were saying, when he's rolled onto his side, we're not going to be able to get them back into a nice sitting position. So it's important that if they do roll onto their side, just ask them up again and then bring them back down into a lay until they're nice and straight, so that you can then properly get them back up into that nice sitting. Good boy. So you sit. Go down. Good. And then back up into a sit. Good. Nice. Good. So Eddie's demonstrated a really nice walking back up onto those front limbs up into a nice straight sit. Now this is a really good exercise to switch on those shoulder extensors. So the front of his shoulder there, we're really going to be engaging those muscles there. So again, really nice. We're helping promote range of motion within the shoulder and the elbow, and it takes a lot of control and coordination to walk back up into sit. Now a big one with this one is, again, if they are feeling discomfort through their elbows or their shoulders, you might find them try and reach up with their head and neck. So they're using their head and neck and their chest to hoik themselves up. Try and really encourage them to just do that nice walking up action rather than relying on their head and neck to bring themselves up into that sit. So training tips.
Yeah, so this is where having your sit on a verbal or a hand signal cue becomes really important to stop that head coming up. So it's not, some people have a different word for this, but it's the same action, whether they're doing it from a stand or they're doing it from a down. It's a sit. Sit means bottom on the floor with your front feet on the floor. Okay, not with your elbows flat on the floor. So it's just still a sit. So just ask for a sit. It's one of those ones that your dog needs to generalize. They need to understand that sit means sit in every scenario. So if they can't, it's not because they don't understand sit, it's just that you haven't generalized it enough. So a really good way to help them with this would be, before this exercise, is just walk around the house asking them to do sits in lots of different places, so that they're really in the kind of mode of doing sits, and then you can go sit down and then ask them for a sit. They're now very used to what a sit means, and you probably find they'll pop straight up into a sit. Be careful not to lure them into this, because as soon as you lure them into this, you're doing exactly what you're trying to avoid, Leanne, which is getting all of them out of position, getting their neck up, which they will naturally do if you lure them. So this is where, if you can't get a sit, do lots of sit practice around the house in different positions. You sitting, you standing, you sitting on the floor, them being on a bed, in the garden, so that they really understand sit means sit in every scenario.
So this will be one which myself will be working on, because it's something that I do struggle with Eddie. When he is in that laying down position, coming back up into that sit, I do rely on luring him back up into that sit, because I find that otherwise he gets a little bit too excited, and he can tend to then jump up at me instead, because I presume because he's a little bit confused as to what I'm asking him to do.
Exactly. So so jumping up or licking your hand, you know, all those things, they're trying to give you any behavior. Some dogs might give you a paw at that point. They're going to try anything in their repertoire that they think might be what you're asking for, which actually brings me back to really making sure that you mark the moment that they get it right. So Leanne uses the word good when he gets it right. I use the word yes. It doesn't matter, as long as they are very clear that when they've got it right, you use a word, yes, and the treat comes afterwards. Don't have treats in your... The whole point is we're trying to avoid having treats in our hands, so we get really good quality exercises.
Yeah, perfect. Right, Eddie, before you go to sleep...
So I've worked quite hard so far today.
Good boy. So we're going to do a stand. Nice, good boy. So this is the last part of the exercise. So going from that sit position up into a nice stand. Now, typically what a lot of dogs do when they come up into the stand is naturally walk forward. We want more of a squatting action. So we want that going from a down, going straight up. So trying to keep those hind limbs in that exactly the same place as they have been in that sit position. It's important for them to do that, because then we're getting a real nice engagement over their gluteals, also through their quadriceps as well. That real nice pushing up action. So we're promoting again joint range of motion. So we're asking the joints to go from that really nice flexion now into extension. Good boy, we did do well there, good boy. Into extension. And we're also asking for that transfer of weight back and forth again. So we're asking them to go from that weight transferred onto their back legs, pushing up back onto those front limbs. So again, we're switching on their core muscles as well. So it takes quite a lot of core stability to do that nice action. Good boy. So Ainsley, how do we stop them from walking too far forward and getting that nice pushing up and down?
So great question, Leanne. I would use the edge of something, or just have your feet right in front of where they've come back up into the sit, so that they can't shuffle forward. You're really trying to make sure that they're really pushing back. Dogs that often shuffle forward are doing it because actually they're trying to avoid using those back legs. So really trying to make sure that they can't. So some of these exercises are really good if you have, I don't know, I've got an old shelf that has been taken off the wall that's quite a nice kind of width. So for one of my dogs, so doing these exercises with them right on the edge of that, so that they don't want to push their front feet off it, and you can help them keep their front feet on, and then they have to move themselves backwards. All of those things really help whilst they're learning that stand means don't come forward. Also, if you are going to have a treat in your hand, I use a flat hand for this. So as I'm asking them to come forward into a stand, my hand is coming out sideways, so I stop with their nose. So actually where their nose stops generally is where their feet will stop, and then they'll push themselves backwards. So my hand signal for a stand becomes that away from their nose, and I hold it so that actually where their nose stops, generally their front feet don't keep coming forward, and therefore their back legs will go backwards.
Perfect. Good. So if we just do a little bit of a recap then. So the aims of this exercise is to promote joint range of motion, activate and engage the muscles, promote core stability and core strength, and also that transfer of weight going back and forward, back and forward. It's also a great warm-up exercise, so it'll be particularly good for the videos later on that we will be showing and demonstrating for other exercise, to use this one as a little bit of a warm-up. We're going to aim to start off, so always work within your dog's comfort levels. We'll aim to start off with doing about 3 to 4 repetitions of this. If your dog is struggling at just 1 repetition, then just stick with 1 repetition for the time being and gradually work up. We're going to work up to doing rule of thumb 10 repetitions, but again, see how your dog goes. If we can't get them to the 10, then don't worry too much. It's just, again, working within your dog's comfort levels. That's where the aim of this is for them to be comfortable whilst also exercising those joints and muscles in a nice, safe environment, and a very low impact and low key way. So if I just run through, so it's nice and fluent for you. So up into a stand. So we're going to do a sit. And let me come back a little bit. Good boy. Sit. And then lie down. Good. And then sit. Good. And stand. Good boy.
Leanne, could you do that again? And can you just reward him after each one, just so that it's nice and clean? The reason he's dodging that little bit in the middle when you go from a lay up is he's following your treat up. So give him the treat in a down, and then ask him for the sit, so that it probably will become cleaner. Just be interesting to see.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so we're going to do a sit. Good. And then lie down. Good. And then sit. 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 Good. And stand. Good. Boy.
So he's coming forward in a stand, isn't he?
Yeah, he's keeping his back legs where they are, but yeah, he's leaning forward again, probably because he's leaning forward for that treat more than anything.
Yeah, so just try what I said, which is keep that flat hand and just keep it on his nose and see what he does.
Stand.
That's better.
Good
there you
ball.
go.
Good, nice.
Yeah, can you see? So they just don't keep their front feet coming forward because now your hand is stopped there, and so they flip their back feet.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Good. So I hope everyone enjoyed that first exercise. Any problems or any questions or anything, please feel free to comment and message us, and we will get back to you as soon as possible on there.
And feel free to show us your little videos, and then we can see how well you're doing.
Yeah, perfect.